Hey, you guys. Okay, so I'm going to try to make this a quick live per my boss's instructions. But I did just want to kind of knock this out because I have a busy few days coming up. And I was going to do this as two separate videos, but I decided I could probably get it out in one. So really quick, because the first part of this is reading. And I know that sometimes when I do things that are like really intensive on the reading front, you guys can just check out on me, but don't check out on me because there are going to be some video examples that cover the document that we're going to be reading. So I'm going to be very quickly going through a neuropsychopharmacology document regarding transsexualism, transgenderism, and brain composition. So, hey Cass, hey Kenya. So something that I found interesting is I was watching, I'll probably do a video on this, I forget who it was. It was some kind of panel with a variety of people from the LGBTQAI+, I guess that's what they're calling it now because it's like 15 letters long at this point. Literally, I'm not just saying that. Community, hey nurse student possibilities. And they were having a lot of like intermingled sort of issues. And Blair White, which is a transgender from here on YouTube, was saying that the non-binary group, the group that doesn't want to be a man or a woman, they just want to be something that's not neither male or female. She was very concerned that them putting themselves under the guise of transgender would take away the medical benefits that pay for the surgeries that transgenders get. And she said there was scientific evidence that male to female transgenders have similar brains to natural women. Hey, Trey. So this got me looking to see if this was actually legit. And also why I started to do a little bit of research is in the last video that I did on the Malika Yoba Breakfast Club interview, a lot of people were very shaken by the fact that the blonde man had such a womanly voice. And so as I was doing research on both of these separate topics, the brain composition of transgender people and the voice thing, which I knew that they could have vocal surgery. I just basically wanted to show you guys some clips of before and afters of when men get their vocal box cut to be shorter the way or tighter the way a woman's is, so that you can have that kind of higher pitched voice that most women have. I was going to show you guys some videos of that. And then I read the study. And the study, I will give you the synopsis of it, but we're going to go through just a small part of it because I want you guys to see this study so you know I'm not making this up. It essentially said that you only see the brain differences, the brain composition differences in transgenders in post-adolescence. So in childhood and in adolescence, which is essentially between the ages of, 0 to, 15, 16, 17, 18, like adult, like when we would consider somebody an adult, like 18, you don't see these brain composition differences. But the study said that because transgenders go through so much behavioral modification, and I'm going to show you the extent to which, that's why I titled this Single White Female, because if you remember in that movie, Single White Female, the crazy lady, the mentally ill lady, carefully observed the other woman so that she could copy her in every way. She wanted to dress like her. She wanted to talk like her. She wanted to look like her. And it's kind of unnerving, but transgenders study, specifically male to female transgenders, because the female to male transgenders have their whole, like a whole separate issue. And I'll talk about it if you guys want to hear about it. But because I've been talking about male to female, specifically them, they do a lot of kind of obsessive studying about women. so that they can mimic us very closely. And until you hear them talk about it in their own words, so I'm going to be playing some videos later in this live, you can't fully appreciate how obsessively they watch us, how much they've analyzed the way that we talk, the way that we dress, the way that we walk even. And the study, the medical study that I'm about to share with you guys, in fact, let me just go ahead and share my screen. The medical study that I'm about to share with you guys, it essentially, yes, Mela, vocal surgery. It's pretty deep. And that's why I wanted to do this video, because I recognize that I probably know a lot about transgenderism, which has formed my view about it, my view that they're severely mentally ill. And I recognize that as I was talking to you guys, that everybody isn't fully aware of the depths of this mental illness and just how much they do. We see them, we know they're dressing like women and this and that, but it's much deeper than that. And I think I wanted just to address that. So first, let's get into the study. And I just want to, let me finish what I was saying because I don't want to be all over the place, but this study is basically saying that all of the behavioral modifications these men engage in to mimic women, the kind of obsessive watching of women, the obsessive copying of women, it causes their brain to change. So their behavior long term will slowly change their brain. And it provides evidence of this. And so that difference, that the fact that, you know, a male to female transgender's brain might resemble a woman's, or the fact that a female to male transgender's brain might resemble a man's, is not because they're born that way. It's because they've changed their behavior so consistently for so long and so obsessively for so long that their brain actually becomes sick and begins to morph based on their behavior. And this is something we don't hear talked about much. And that is why it was really important to me to bring this study forward, because studies like this are often snuffed out. I did a video, I think it was Brown University, whose team did a study where they showed that societal influence, strangely, this study shows the same thing, but that societal influence caused a lot of children to believe that they were gay or transgender. And the LGBTQAI plus community bullied them into pulling the study. So studies like this are hard to find because people are literally bullied into pulling them. Fortunately, Korea, the Korean College of Neuropsychopharmacology and the Office of Clinical Psychopharmacology and Neuroscience, and the Psychiatry and Psychology Research Center at Tehran University of Medical Sciences in Iran, and a bunch of people got together and published this study analyzing all, and I'm going to put a link to the study in the chat. You can PDF it, and it gives literally maybe 30 studies for your perusal, and I did read a lot of them. And these kind of studies are hard to find in the United States, right? But I want to dig into it, and then I'm going to get to the video. So if you guys can suffer through the talking portion of this, we will get to a visual portion, and I encourage you to stay around for the visual portion because it's actually pretty crazy. It's pretty freaky, and I think it's something that we all do need to watch. But before we get there, I want us to understand the basis for me showing you these videos. So this paper is titled "Transsexualism: A Different Viewpoint to Brain Changes," because remember, they say that the brains, and they are, of male to female and female to male transgenders are very similar to the sex that they identify with. But everything is not as it seems, right? They are not born that way. We're going to talk about in this study why their brains look the way they do, and the fact that their brains were not always that way. So I'm not going to go read everything, but I have highlighted the parts that I want to focus in on. Thank you, Atticus. So it says transsexualism refers to a condition or belief which results in gender dysphoria in individuals and makes them insist that their biological gender is different from their psychological and experienced gender. The question here is whether these reported changes form part of the etiology of transsexualism or themselves result from transsexualism culture, behaviors, and lifestyle. So the question they're posing in this is it the brain that is making the person act transgender, or is it the fact that they are acting that way that changes their brain? Let me restate that. This study is looking at whether it is the brain of a transgender person that makes them transgender, or if it is the fact that they behave like the opposite sex that changes their brain. And I think that's an important distinction, right? Let's move to the introduction. And again, we're not going to read all of this. We're going to be skipping through, but I just want to get some key points out. The evaluation of the neuropsychological and neurophysiological differences between males and females has been a hot topic among neuroscientists because various structural and functional differences of the human brain have been observed in a sex-dependent manner. For instance, differences have been reported in the whole brain, cortical thickness, CTH, lobar volumes, and gray and white matter volumes. And gray and white matter are what you will hear most transgender people refer to when they say that their brains are like the sex that they identify with. Corpus callosum size and connectivity profiles, and it is shown that they are correlated with distinctive cognitive abilities of males and females regarding visuospatial processing and language. Motivated by this category of studies, many researchers have attempted to investigate the human brain in the gender identity disorder, or more recently in gender dysphoria. And we know that gender dysphoria is what they currently refer to this mental illness as. Transsexualism refers to a condition or belief which results in gender dysphoria in individuals and makes them insist that their biological gender is different from their psychological and experienced gender. Studies on twins, birth order, familial groups, and sex genes have supported biological causes, such as prenatal exposure to sexual hormones and genetic factors for gender dysphoria. These studies are sparse, and their results are sometimes inconsistent. Some studies have no obvious biological incongruities. So that's essentially saying that every study does not present the same information. In relation to the etiology of gender dysphoria, we should consider other potential mental problems and environmental factors. Review the literature on comorbid psychiatric conditions of gender dysphoria demonstrates that different estimated prevalences of psychiatric disorders have been reported in individuals with gender dysphoria. A recent study reported current prevalence of conditions according to current DSM standards other than personality disorders in 38% of male to females and 37% of female to males. So personality disorders, 38% of transgender men who want to be women have personality disorders. 37% of females who want to be men have personality disorders. The study also reported lifetime prevalence of DSM disorders, so bona fide mental illnesses, excluding personality disorders, in 68% of men who want to be women and 71% of females who want to be men. So basically about 70% of them have mental disorders outside of personality disorders. 70% of them have a lifetime history of mental illness, of mental disorders. And in addition to that, 38 to 37% of them, depending on if they are male or female, have issues with personality disorders. Personality disorders have been observed in 12% of male to females and 18% of female to males. Most prevalent personality disorders in the most prevalent personality disorders in transgender peoples were schizoid, avoidant, and borderline personality disorder. Moreover, regarding environmental factors, so first of all, what they're saying is these people are overwhelmingly mentally ill outside of their gender dysphoria issues. Upwards of 70% of them have had mental illnesses outside of personality disorders, so not nervousness or anxiety, nothing like that, but actual serious mental illnesses. Most of those mental illnesses are schizoid disorders, avoidant, and borderline personality disorders. Those are pretty serious mental disorders. Moreover, regarding environmental factors, parenting and family variables, such as very closeness to the mother or father absence. Whoa, listen to this. Extreme closeness to the mother, the absence of a father, or a parent's wish for a boy or a daughter, and psychopathology in the parents, meaning the parents have an issue, a mental issue, have been suggested to contribute to gender dysphoria as major factors. And then I want to go over all of the studies that they looked at. And if you guys are interested, like I said, this document will be in the box after the end of this live. It'll probably take about 20 or 30 minutes to get there because of StreamYard. But you'll be able to see all of the studies that they looked at and all of the studies that they cite. And these are studies from all over the world, right? So this was published and backed, but all of the studies that are included here are from the entire world. So they looked at cortical thickness, they looked at white matter, they looked at gray matter. Specifically worth noting in the studies for gray matter is that 2 of the studies actually didn't find any difference in gray matter proportions between untreated male to female transgenders and control males, which would be natural males. They also looked at structural and functional connectivity profiles. So these are all of the studies that they have done on transgender people, and this is looking cumulatively at a vast majority of accepted studies worldwide regarding transgenderism. They also did task-related neuroimaging. And I have to say, it was weird looking at the task-related neuroimaging studies because they would do stuff like have transgender people watch pornography and measure like their reaction in comparison to like, you know, people who are not mentally ill. I just thought like a lot of those task-related neuroimaging studies were really bizarre. So they're worth a read if nothing else, just because they're weird. The authors observed less clear findings in children. So this is where it gets interesting, because they did find differences in all of those studies that they did throughout the earth, throughout the whole planet. These studies have consistently found differences in transgenders' brains. So that's true. But here's the interesting thing. When they looked at children, they really didn't find those differences. It says the authors observed less clear findings in children. That is, boys with gender dysphoria showed an activation pattern similar to their biological sex. And the same was for girls. In general, an overview of brain morphometric and neural activity findings in transgenders demonstrates contradictory results, which cannot reflect masculization or feminization of the transgender's brain. Indeed, there are very inconsistent neural anatomical and neural functional differences between transgender subjects and same-sex controls. It is shown that the structural and functional organization of the brain changes as a result of accepting cultural beliefs and performing cultural pattern behaviors due to inherent neuroplasticity, which essentially means that the brain is a plastic. The brain is flexible and it will change because of our behavior. Our behavior can change the actual structural and functional organization of our brain. Then the modified brain directs individual behaviors fitting into a specific cultural concepts and adjusts concurrent social cultural environments. They call this the CBB loop model. And it suggests two types of behavior. Culturally contextualized behavior indicates observed actions. This is really important and why we have to keep our children away from television and all of that kind of stuff. Observed behaviors. So the exposure to the behavior, which is what that Brown study found that they had shut down. And Brown's study was here in the United States. Exposure to behavior, inappropriate behavior for your sex, can affect the brain. That is what this study and all of the studies it looked at from throughout the world showed. And then it goes on to say what their hypotheses about brain changes in transgenders are based on that CBB loop model. That loop model of you taking in information that causing a change in your brain, and then because your brain is now changed, it then causes the behavior. A review, so for example, we see this in post-traumatic stress disorder. That's a perfect example, right? So in post-traumatic stress disorder, a person is traumatized. So maybe if you've been in a car accident and you have post-traumatic stress disorder, loud noises may cause you to have a reaction. That's not something that existed in you prior. But your brain has now changed because of the trauma. And so now your behavior is modified because of that trauma. That is essentially what the CBB loop model is talking about, that the same works with transgenderism. That if you have a parent, if you remember back where we read in the study, if you have a parent that, has a little girl, but they really wanted a little boy, they may treat that child in a more masculine way. They may not support feminine behavior. If you have a parent who has a psychological disorder, they may impose certain behaviors or impose certain ideologies on their children. If a child is exposed to inappropriate content, inappropriate situations, it can model their behavior. This is essentially intentional and or unintentional grooming of the mind. Very similar to pedophilia, right? You expose the child to sexual activities, and then you are grooming them to be prepared for the actual act. Something very similar happens according to the CBB loop model. And it's reinforced by that person then engaging in behaviors that are inappropriate for their natural sex. And the more they engage in those behaviors, the more their brain changes. But let's take a look at the data. A review of genetic studies on sexual orientation and transsexualism, as well as homosexualism, revealed that no clear and distinct genetic relationship with transsexualism and sexual orientation has been observed until the present time. Until recent history, there was no indication that it was biological in nature. Therefore, it might be expected that the changes that occur in the brain of transgender individuals start to appear after a particular period of particular stage and period of life. This particular stage probably starts from the time when the child favors toys that are not suitable for his or her gender, or when he or she likes to play with kids of the opposite sex alone, like when they won't, like a little boy that will only play with little girls, and then there's no correction by the parent there, but he just only plays with little girls. He refuses to play with little boys. Or a little girl who only wants to play with little boys, doesn't want to play with little girls. Or when he or she is brought up in a family that does not accept his or her gender. And I think this is a lot of the case with these kids, transgenders that we see, is that their parents have a lot to do with that. Or when he or she is brought up in a family that does not accept his or her gender and shows biased interests in the opposite sex and treats the child with behaviors appropriate for the opposite sex. Can we talk about the parents that want babies? The father that wanted a son, so he treats his little girl like a boy. Will it always end in transgenderism or homosexuality? No. Could it be a contributing factor? The data says yes. Existing literature demonstrates that there is no solid evidence for the differences in the function/structure of the brain between children and adolescents without GD. So when these people are children, their brains look normal. This is very important because the transgender community will say, well, the gray and white matter of the brain looks like the sex we identify with. But it is important to note that studies from across the globe, from all over the world, show that children's brains look normal. When they are children, their brains look normal. It is only after adolescence that we see those brain changes. That means they're not born that way. That's what that means. They're not born with brains that look different. That comes later in life. Indeed, there is no comprehensive selfness and understanding of the sexual issues in childhood and adolescence. The cultural and socio-cultural context and specific cultural environments based behaviors have not yet fully developed in this period. So they go on to say that children don't even have sexuality like that. They don't even view sex and gender like that. Not only are their brains fully normal, but they're developmentally, they don't conceptualize the world in the way that adults do. So they can't even have those ideologies. That's why when people say, I knew since I was 3, no, you didn't know since you were 3. Maybe you like to wear your mom's shoes at 3 and then were encouraged to continue in that behavior. But you weren't gay from the age of 3. You weren't transgender from the age of 3. That's not how that works. Children don't have sexuality in that way. That's essentially what the study is saying. After adolescence and over time, the subject becomes more familiar with gender and sexual issues and faces transsexualism or even homosexuality due to lack of proper selfness, lack of appropriate parenting. Let me repeat it, lack of appropriate parenting, non-correction, or his or her childhood background. Then new ideas and beliefs, i.e., a new specific cultural environment, form for the subject that lead to inappropriate behavior for his or her own biological sex. Consequently, the subject attempts to avoid right and normal cultural contextualized behavior. He or she imagines himself or herself in his or her preferred gender identity rather than his or her biological sex, and thus tries to adapt his or her values, lifestyle, and behaviors to his or her gender identity. And I'm legit going to show some videos of transgenders doing just that, because that's facts. And we're about to watch transgenders talk about how they do just that very thing. Therefore, a subject with gender dysphoria tries to experience life in his or her preferred gender identity and skews from his or her biological gender and normal cultural contextualized behaviors every day. So every day, then these people start trying to behave like the opposite sex. Depending on how much the subject with gender dysphoria persists in changing his or her gender, and the extent to which he or she has experienced gender identity, we will then observe brain changes, cause and effect. In childhood, the brains look normal according to all of the research. By the time they start doing this research on adult transgenders, their brains look like the sex they identify with. So then they have asked what goes on between childhood and post-adolescence that has made these people's brains change. And the hypothesis, right, is that because the brain is plastic, and we know from research, and we know from things like post-traumatic stress, grooming for pedophilia, and other things, that the brain can change because of environmental factors, cultural exposure, and trauma. That a person who persists in attempting to behave like the opposite sex can get a change, can see a change in the makeup of their brain. They said, depending on how much the subject with gender dysphoria persists in changing his or her identity, and to the extent which he or she has experienced gender identity, we will observe brain changes, and as a result, related culturally voluntary behaviors. Perhaps this is why the brain studies in transgender people are largely contradictory, meaning that all transgender people's brains don't look different. This is important to note. All of their brains don't look like the sex they identify with. Just some of them do. And they're hypothesizing that individuals who have not gone as far down the rabbit hole, we will see a less significant difference in their brains. That the more a person persists in their delusion and chases the desire to be the opposite sex, the more their brain morphology starts to change. Because of their behavior, their persistent and constant delusion. However, for instance, when a person with gender dysphoria whose biological gender is male regulates his lifestyle based on his preferred gender identity, the female, so a man who wants to be a woman, we should expect, according to the CBB loop model, that the brain will adapt to this belief and this lifestyle with time, and consequently changes in function, and then the structure of the brain. So that's where I'm going to stop. That's where I'm going to stop with that. And now I want to move on to the videos, because I titled this Single White Female. And the reason I titled it Single White Femalesque is again because in the movie Single White Female, you had a mentally ill person who became obsessed with someone. And this person watched them and copied them and dressed like them and talked like them and tried to do everything to become them. That's why I titled this live Single White Femalesque. And now with consideration of that study, that demonstrates that it is not, because we don't see these brain differences in children. Children who, quote unquote, identify as transgender, their brains are still normal. But when they become adults, we start to see a change in the brain. However, those changes are not consistent. Some transgenders will have brains that look very similar to the sex that they identify with, some won't. It all depends on how far along in their delusion they are and how long they have been attempting to live as the opposite sex. And I would dare say that if they're on hormones, I would love a study that looked into if the hormones play a part in the changes that go on in the brain. Is there a difference between transgenders who are under treatment, hormonal treatment, and those who aren't? So with consideration of that and Single White Femalesque, I want to start with how to pass. We're just going to play small snippets of all of these videos. I just want you guys to take a listen to this. I want you to listen to them talk about what it is like to pass. Yeah, we're going to be looking at videos on how to pass, how they tuck their penises to hide them. We're going to find something really interesting as they watch how women walk. Women walk a certain way because our bodies are built different than men's. That's why our hips sway. Transgenders watch this and they practice it. Like, that's why I'm calling this Single White Femalesque. They study women very closely to mimic them. And then we're going to talk about vocal surgery. So there is a surgery because women's vocal cords and men's vocal cords are different. That's why women sound different. And we're also going to look at some transgenders talk about, because they've really thought this out, talk about how they change their voices prior to voice surgery, or if they opt to never get it. And as we're going through these videos, I want you to imagine a life where you have to 24 hours a day, or at least when you're in public and trying to pass, you are concentrating on keeping your penis hidden. You're concentrating on talking in a voice that's different than your natural voice. You're concentrating on, what you're going to wear. One of these men talks about screaming like a woman. If you have to cry out, or if you're surprised, how you don't sound like a man. So when somebody is so deep in their pathology and so deep in their delusion that everything about their life, they're constantly fixated on presenting and being something that they're not. That takes us back to the study that we just read, which discusses that behavior eventually morphs their brain into something that is not natural. So let's start with how to pass. I'm going to make sure my volume's all the way up, and hopefully you guys can hear it.
Because it's like a $30, if that, synthetic, just gross. So just kind of like for a smoother ride, I would recommend just get a good wig if you're gonna wear one. Pay a good amount, invest in it because it's gonna be worth it. Get human hair, something that just looks like natural human hair. Because especially after ditching the wig, my hair finally grew out long enough to do a little pony, which I am in love with. I realized, like, okay, wow, natural hair really does contribute to passing a lot more than I thought. And obviously it can just contribute a real, like, artificial look to you, and it can just kind of honestly, like, do the opposite of what you're trying to do, which is look look natural and fit in. And it can actually just bring more attention to you and just, I don't know, I would notice when I would put the wig on, since it was just so bad and didn't look like natural hair, that's when I really had to cake up the makeup to calm.
So this man, this is a man that we're looking at. I do want to make that clear. This man was saying how if you have to wear a wig, make sure it's a very good wig. But it's better to grow your hair out because you'll be more passable with your natural hair. And that if you have to wear a wig, then you have to do an uptick in makeup. And makeup is a common theme here. So us women are really shooting ourselves in the foot with all the makeup because makeup is one of the ways that they help themselves pass. And you'll notice that all of them have on an interestingly high amount of makeup, more than we may realize. Let's go ahead and go to the next video. This is also a man, and he is giving passing tips for other transgender people.
But makeup gives, sorry, I'm like looking down, I'm cheating because I forget what I wrote. Makeup gives me personally more confidence. Like when I don't have a full face on compared to when I have a full face on, like I feel so much more confident out in public, like going out there like this. And I'm like, hi boys, how are you? Like compared to barefaced, I'm like, I don't like to go to stores in that barefaced. I don't feel like I pass as well. People say I pass, but I don't think so. So it's just.
So again, another transgender, you'll notice they were both wearing eyelashes, heavy eye makeup, lipstick, blush, the whole nine. They're doing everything. That's why I said as women, we don't help ourselves because it's easier for them to pass. If women didn't wear this much makeup too, they would really stand out and their faces would look more manly without the makeup. Unfortunately, with breast implants and makeup, and then as the other transgender said, it's best to grow their natural hair out because natural hair helps them to look more feminine. You heard this transgender say that he is not even comfortable going to the store without makeup because he doesn't feel he can pass without the makeup on. Let's go to one last one. It was hard for me to find Black people because most transgenders are white. But I did pull 2 Black people. I will say in the next group of videos, you are going to be seeing the bodies of transgender people in bikinis. If you're going to be confused by seeing a man with his penis tucked, with a very feminine looking body, or if you're going to be offended or anything like that, you're going to want to probably leave my video in about 3 minutes. Because in about 3 minutes, we're going to be watching tutorials on how they tape their penises and scrotums down so that they can present as people with female bodies. So yeah, that's just a warning. Don't say you were not warned.
Okay, so we talked about makeup, we talked about hair. Now I want to talk about outfits and like your appearance when you go out, because this can be a dead fucking giveaway. I had to learn like in several hard ways that the way that I was dressing was just getting me caught. Okay, so I like to wear stuff that is high-waisted with a belt. I like to have it cinched in. Something that isn't going to draw too much attention to yourself unless like you want attention. Wait.
Yeah. Okay, so we just saw that man's body, and I just want to show you because he was nice to do the whole tutorial. He did like a whole makeup tutorial. So let me see. I just want you to see. That's how he started out. And then he ended up
and that's basically the idea of
where we saw him. Okay, so let's go to the next thing. Now we're going to be looking at how to tuck. So far we know that they are very cognizant of their hair. They're very cognizant of makeup. As the last man was talking about, and yes, this is a man too. I don't want anybody, we're only looking at men here. So I don't want anybody to be confused. So we've heard them talk about how they need to grow their hair out because that helps them look more natural. The importance of makeup, the importance of picking clothes that are not too flashy. That's what the last man was talking about. He also suggested that if you are Black or if you aren't Black, but if you're transgender, but especially for Black men, that if you wear bangs, that can help you appear more feminine. Now we're going to look at some videos on how to tuck penises.
Scissors to tear it. You want to also get your pieces of tape and you want them to be at least this long. I'm going to put them on the wall behind me so that I can just have that sitting there so that I can have like a lead and know what I'm doing with them. Now while I'm putting them on the wall, I like to kind of connect them side by side so that when I take it off the wall, which you'll see in a little bit, it's already in place and in form for me to tuck everything and snatch. Kind of be careful because once the tape kind of scrunches up, it stays like that because it's so sticky. And so you don't want to be wasting tape. Trust me, I've wasted a shit ton of it. Another thing that I never really hear anyone saying in these tucking videos that I've seen or heard of, they don't tell you what to do with your ball skin. When you push your testicles, let me get my demonstration. Oops, shit, I'm dropping everything. When you push your testicles up into the inguinal canal, you're going to have extra skin from your balls. What you're going to do is you're going to pull that skin from behind your shaft and you're going to wrap it around your shaft like a hot dog. Think of the ball skin as like the hot dog bun, and then think of your shaft as the hot dog. You're gonna pull that skin forward, and then you're gonna take more tape, and then you're gonna wrap it around the skin and around the shaft to keep the skin in place. Because a problem that people have when tucking, I know it was a problem that I had, was that on the sides of my panties, my testicle skin would be coming out the sides. And it'd be like, okay, either she has really thick vagina lips or she has a dick. Make sure you do that. Make sure you do it really tight. I usually do about 2 or 3 strips just to really go around there and get it.
I'm sorry, but I'm dead. He said if you don't do it right, if you don't properly pull your testicle skin over your penis like a hot dog bun on a hot dog and tape it just right, then the testicle skin will come out of the side of your panties. I can't, you know what? You can't make this up. This is why their brains are changing. I'm not just saying that. That's why I wanted to read that study first. Because if I would have just said that, y'all would have said that I was bigot or I was being hateful. I'm just saying that this isn't the kind of behavior the study is talking about. When you are duct taping your penis and balls every day, your brain starts to change. That's a thing that occurs.
I tape it double so that it's really secure so that nothing touches. Did Daddy text me? Yeah. As you can see back here, I have my tape ready to go to snatch me. And another thing is, if you have a friend living with you, a roommate, usually this will be too long and you can see that sticking out the back of your underwear. You can see it on your back at the top. So usually have a roommate come and chop that top piece off and throw it away, but you'd rather have it be long at the start so that you're not running too short on tape, you know what I mean? I'm going to tuck now, and I'll be right back to show you guys what it looks like in my bikinis, and I'll give you more of a talk through as I have myself tucked. All right, guys, so this is bathing suit number 1. This was from Icon Swim. I know this is not a bathing suit haul, but I want you guys to see from every angle.
That is a man who still has his penis. Tell me this is not insane.
How the bottoms look. Literally looks so good. You can't see any of the tape on the side. And a little trick that I use if I have razor bumps here is I put some makeup and then some powder. It works so good. And what I did was I had Christine come through the back when I was pulling the tape back, and she snipped the extra tape so that the tape wouldn't be hanging out right here in the bathing suit, because
because that'll make you clog. You'll get very cloggable, honey.
You're welcome.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. That's Christine, everyone. Say hello.
Hello, bitches.
And so like in the front, you can see that it looks really.
Okay, so that's enough of that one. Let's take a look at another. And again, remember, we're watching these in the context of the study that we read earlier. I want you to really think about the study that we read earlier as you're watching all of these videos. So we've gone through how they try to pass with makeup and hair and clothing. Now we're looking at how they try to pass by taping and hiding their penises, because, you know, they've got penises overwhelmingly. And so you've got to do something with those.
So for those of you nosy ass dumb bitches at home that are gonna comment, did she have this surgery? Did she do this? Did she do that? First of all, bitch, doesn't fucking matter. Second of all, no, I have not had the surgery yet, but hopefully within the next year-ish or so, that will be happening. So until then, this bitch is my best fucking friend. And I know so many trans people who don't fucking use duct tape, use like gaffs or whatever, which like are just like spank thongs, if that makes sense, just to like snatch everything together, if you know what.
Okay, so this man talks really, really fast. He is saying that they make a thong that's kind of like Spanx for trans men, and they can put those on, and that kind of holds their penis in. We're actually going to see a man wearing those in just a second. But this is another person that uses duct tape. So this man actually duct tapes his penis.
What I mean? So for me, I'm like, bitch, I don't want to use a gaff. Fuck a gaff, bitch. I'm using fucking duct tape because, hello, like it snatches everything. So what I do every time I go to the pool is I'll just be chilling in the bathroom and my roommate's here at that. And so the first step is that I always take a piece, probably this big-ish, rip that bitch off. Oh, I don't even want to rip this off because it's like that's money down the drain. But I guess I'll do it for you bitches. And so I take a piece of duct tape, literally like this big, bitch. We are snatching that shit to fucking Mars. So let's pretend like this is my crotch area. Wait, does that even make sense? Okay, so let's just pretend that like this is like my thigh gap, if that makes sense. And so what I do is start on like my upper crotch area, like right below your bikini line, and you kind of just start like right here. And then what I do, oh hi ass. And so what I do then is go like behind, and then you pull it all the way back up your fucking ass, and that's step number one. And so then you just repeat step number one, and then like with another piece of duct tape, the same side, you kind of create like a line, so you go like across your crotch area, right where your bikini will be. And you have to make sure you're not just like slapping the fucking duct tape all over your ass, because then it's like, hello.
Okay, so that is number 2. And let's go to number 3, and then we're going to move on to some other things that they do. So this is one that does not use duct tape, and he's going to give a better tutorial. He's actually going to touch his penis. So this should be fascinating. You guys won't see the penis though, but he's definitely going to grab his own penis. We will observe that.
On, and this is pretty much what it's going to look like before you tug. Now, because
now I know a lot of you men are probably like, man, like that's crazy. But I think as they take hormones, their penises start to be different. I know they lose sexual drive. It may cause some diminishment in that area. Some of them might just have little penises. I guess this is a case if you're trying to hide your penis where having a small penis would be a benefit. Because that's a very tiny bulge that this man has. But he's going to hide it nonetheless, because a bulge is a bulge. And so it does, you know, have to be hidden if you're going to pretend to be a woman.
of the restrictions online, and just because I don't want to show my body parts, I'm going to be not showing you anything underneath, but I'm just going to kind of give you an idea of how to tuck everything into place. Now, just like I mentioned earlier, you're pretty much going to grab your testicles and your shaft, and you're pretty much going to push everything back while also shooting up your testicles in your little sockets. And yeah, you guys are gonna see how it's done. So pretty much just start by pushing all the skin back beneath and underneath your legs and really shoot those testicles up there, you know? And then you're going to hold this backhand right here, just kind of hold everything into place and pull your underwear up just to really kind of lock everything in. Now that pretty much was simple for you guys. I believe that this is like the easiest way to tuck without the pain, without the tape, without the tights and everything. This is pretty much the best way to get it done. Now, like I said before, the first item.
So this one is wearing those kind of Spanx underwear that the other two were talking about. But they prefer duct tape because they feel like it's more unclockable. You'll hear, I know you guys have heard that word throughout several of the videos. Unclockable means you're not going to know that they're men.
Is mandatory and the second part is optional, but I really recommend you guys getting something like this just because throughout the day your underwear can kind of start sagging it down and everything and just kind of making that tuck a lot more loose, but this right here is going to prevent that from happening. It's going to hold everything into place. You're going to lock it in together and it's just going to hold everything together. So pretty much you're going to just grab this piece right here and you are going to lock in those straps. You'll have to excuse this last strap. It kind of broke today right here, so I'm only having to use the first two hooks and I can't use the third one, but it still works just as well. And then you can pull up your pants and you can just pull them up as high as possible. Now this is pretty much an important part about tucking as well. You're gonna need some kind of.
And actually, I have to say that's good advice because the thing that always has me able to clock them is their crotch area in pants. And the more endowed that man is, the more the crotch area will give him away. And Blair White, which is one of the more passable transgenders here on YouTube, is a perfect example. If you see him from the waist down, that's clearly a man. This man has a very small package, as we saw. So I think throughout the day, and I would have to see him walking around, but I think if they all wore pants, we could tell them much more easy because maybe it's because I'm from San Francisco, y'all. I can tell when somebody's tucking. It's even kind of obvious in a dress, but it's most obvious when they wear pants, which is why he said you really have to kind of hike the crotch area up high because that mimics how it would fit on a woman, because we don't have anything down there. We just have a slit, and so that's what he's trying to mimic. So let's keep it moving. So now we know that they observe how we dress, our makeup, our hair. We understand how they tuck their penises, and remember, this whole conversation is in the context of the study that we saw earlier that says that as children, their brains are normal, but the more they engage in these behaviors that we're watching, it starts to change their brains. So when transgenders say, well, our gray matter, our white matter, and actually many other things that we covered in that study are very similar to the sex that they identify with, I want us to be clear that they don't start out this way. Transgender, quote unquote, children have healthy, normal brains. It is only after a prolonged period of time in engaging in these sorts of behaviors that we are watching that their brains begin to change. And the level and degree and intensity of that change varies based on whether or not they how long they've been engaging in these behaviors. Sorry, my man wanted me. Okay, so I want to go to how they walk, and then I want to end with voice. Because voice is another something that was difficult. And the voice part, I really wanted to address because I know in the Breakfast Club interview, so many people were kind of shook by the fact that the blonde dude basically sounded very feminine. but there's a surgery for that to help them sound like women. So first we're going to watch a video on why women walk the way they do, and then we're going to watch a tutorial by a trans man who is showing other men how to walk like women. And these are probably things as straight people we have never thought of before. So it's really interesting to see the depth with which they really observe both men and women, because they are obsessed with the idea of transforming themselves, or at least emulating and imitating the sex that they want to be. And again, I know people were asking about the female to male, and I will take a poll on my community tab if you guys really want that. But right now we're just doing male to female, because the female to male, that's like a whole different box of, worms.
The sway of the hips is associated with beauty and femininity. If you look closely at the woman in the yellow dress, you'll see that when her right foot leads forward, her right hip appears to rise and swing outward. As her right foot moves behind her, her right hip moves down and swings in slightly. So why do women walk this way? It boils down to some key differences between male and female anatomy. A key difference between the skeleton of men and women is the pelvic bone. The female pelvis tends to be wider and shorter than the male pelvis. It needs to be this way because women's hips need to accommodate something totally crazy: pregnancy. The female pelvis needs to accommodate a baby that weighs 3.5 kilograms on average and be able to push.
So for me, and I could do, I literally could do a series on this. For me, I recognize things about men and women. So remember when I did that video on facial feminization, and I was saying that certain traits are masculine in faces. And actually, if you guys were paying attention to those transgenders who had not had the facial surgery, they all had prominent brow ridges. They all had an angular jaw. Things like that are signs of masculine features in men. But also, I noticed things like the length of the arms, right? Women's arms hit about mid-thigh, where the belly button is. Because women have a pelvis and carry a uterus in their bodies, our bodies naturally tilt forward at a slight angle because we have bits and pieces in our bodies that men don't. And also the way that we walk. Women don't sway their hips because we're trying to be sexy. I mean, we do exaggerate it sometimes to be sexy, but it's a natural way that we walk because of the fact that our bodies are literally very different than men's. This is not a superficial difference. We have organs you guys don't have. We have, our pelvises are shaped differently. And so I wanted to show this video because transgenders actually know this about women, and they try to emulate the way that we are naturally, because if they don't, they will be clocked as men if they are around natural women.
Push the baby out during childbirth. In spite of being a doctor, I still can't get over the fact that women literally have a human growing inside them for 9 months. It's totally nuts. Anyway, getting back to the point. Because of the extra width of the pelvic bone, the hip joint is different in women as compared to men. The hip joint has two parts: the ball of the femur, which rotates within a socket in the pelvic bone, called the acetabulum. If you look at the hip joint from above, you can see that the acetabulum in men is aligned straight across.
So you guys, the shape of the woman's body doesn't matter. All women walk the same way. The walk may look more exaggerated if a woman has wider hips, but whether a woman has straight hips or wide hips, it's not her hips that cause women to walk that way. It is the pelvis and the uterus and the shape of the bones that cause women to walk that way. So this is not about body shape. Fat women, skinny women, curvy women, SpongeBob SquarePants women will all pretty much walk in the same exact manner because of our physiology, not because of the shape of our bodies, but because of our bone structure and because of the organs, the ovary, the uterus, those body parts that we have in there. That is what causes it. So the shape of the woman is irrelevant.
The ball of the femur, while the acetabulum in women tends to angle forward. This is called the acetabular anteversion angle, and women tend to have higher anteversion than men. This means that in women, the pelvic bone needs to move along with the femur as women walk, as compared to men, where the pelvic bone stays roughly in the same position while
I know that he is boring, but it's important that you guys watch this because I want you to understand this, because we're about to watch a transgender person give a tutorial, and this will put in perspective what he's explaining to other men about how to walk.
men walk. Now looking from the front again, you'll notice something different when it comes to the angle of the femur. In men, the femur has a small angle moving in towards the center of the body. But in women, the angle of the femur is much larger. This angle is called the Q angle, and on average, the Q angle is 4.6 degrees greater in women than in men. This doesn't seem like a lot, but it makes a big difference in how women walk. In women, a combined result of a wider pelvis, greater anteversion of the acetabulum, and higher Q angle means that the pelvis has to rotate in order to allow a woman to walk.
All right, so again, let me mute it and we'll watch these women walking. It's important to note that the reason women walk the way that they do has nothing to do with anything other than our bodies are literally built differently. So now we're about to watch a man give a tutorial on how to walk like a woman versus a man. So again, we're looking at all men, so let's go ahead and take a look at this.
Walk and kind of what's going on with that and what's behind it. So with a guy, he walks with one side of his body at a time. So he'll start with maybe his left side or right side, doesn't really matter. So let's just focus on the left because I'm left-handed. He will move his whole body to one side. So his shoulder, his hip, his foot, everything will go that way. And then when he takes his next step, everything will go that way. So it's kind of like a really rigid zigzag motion when he's moving. So it will look something like this, guys. So this is a bit scary for me, but I'm just going to do it. So you'll go like that and like that. So like this. I see a lot of trans women with this walk. You need to stop doing that walk if possible, because if you are trying to transition, it's not really going to help you, because people in society a lot of the time aren't nice and they will pick up on that. So if you can not do that, it might help you. So yeah, guys, I'm going to show you again. So it's good, 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 good. As you can see, when I am moving my body, my feet never cross the center line of my body. They stay on the side that they are positioned. And if you really get it, you go like this. Now, to look more feminine/female, what you need to do is you need to keep this central bit of your body to just under your bust, so from your chin to kind of just below your bust, this square here, this core area needs to stay central at all times. You do not want to move this from side to side, because then you're going to...
So as you're listening to this, again, I want you to think of the study. Imagine walking through the day. He's about to talk about how to walk like a woman. Imagine walking through the day and having to constantly fixate on making sure that you walk a particular way. Like, think about walking. How much do you walk in life? up and down the stairs, around the mall. Imagine with every step having to make sure that you're not moving your upper body, that you're swaying your hips, that you're doing all these things that don't come natural to you because your body is not built to walk that way, but you're attempting to walk that way. Remember from the previous video, women walk the way we do because if we didn't, we wouldn't be able to walk. So we rotate our pelvis and our hips more because that's literally functionally the only way we're going to be able to walk. Whereas they are attempting to mimic something that is completely unnatural for them. So when that study talks about these heavy pathological fixations change the brains of these men and women that believe themselves to be the opposite gender, we have to think about all these videos we're watching. Yes, they're shocking and all of that, but more than that, imagine going through life every day and you're fixated on all of these different elements day after day after day after day. That's what the study was talking about. And it causes a change in how their brains look.
Fall into kind of like the masculine range. So you want to keep this core bit central. You want to keep it still. You want to keep your shoulders back at all times. It's all about posture as well. Guys tend to crouch over more. Females that tend to have their shoulders back, looking up to the gods because we go into the gods, honey. Yeah. So you want to put your shoulders back. You want to keep your core in a straight neutral position, and then with your legs, you want to walk so that it's like you're on a tightrope, like so. So your feet are literally going in one straight line. So you'll bring your left leg over to the center, and your right leg will go over to the center, and you'll just keep doing that. So I'm going to show you now what I'm talking about. So keep your back straight, your shoulders pushed back. You want to keep this square position straight, and then you want to walk so you're on a tightrope. So
y'all, he's trying so hard. He's saying you can, if you put your hands on your hips, it helps you to get the motion. He's trying so hard. Let's move on to the voice, okay? Because the voice I noticed was a major issue for people in that Breakfast Club interview. So first of all, let's talk about the voice surgery. Let's go there first. Let's go to the voice surgery and just watch how the procedure works. And it will also explain why their voices sound the way they do when they try to mimic women when they haven't had the surgery yet. And I think a lot of this is useful too, because we don't realize how different men and women are until you delve into what these men do to mimic us.
Your gender reassignment surgery is behind you. You are nearly the woman you were meant to be. Although you look and feel feminine now, there is still one important element missing: the female voice. While performing the procedure reducing the size of the Adam's apple, which gives a more female contour of the neck, the same incision can be used to increase the so-called vocal pitch by a small operation on the larynx. The surgery takes 30 minutes and can be performed under local anesthesia. The cricoid cartilage is approximated to the thyroid cartilage with several firm stitches under the skin which cannot be seen nor felt. This tilts the cricoid upwards and brings the thyroid downwards, creating more tension on the vocal cords, resulting in a higher feminine voice. This way, you create two improvements in one affordable procedure. The operation is performed in a high-tech clinic in Bangkok by an internationally acclaimed transgender team. You don't get a second chance for a first impression. Preacher Aesthetic Institute, the right voice for the new you.
So we observed how they change the man's vocal cords to more closely mimic women's to raise the pitch of their voice. So if you do meet a transgender and they have a very feminine voice, some men, their voices never drop a whole lot, but do know that they are able to get a surgery to give them a higher pitched voice. And a lot of transgenders are very open because they know we're not watching their videos. They put up videos of before and after, like how they sounded before and after the surgery. So it doesn't hurt. I think when we talk about co-signing transgenderism and these movements and things like that, I feel like most people are unaware of how deep this actually is and how deep of a mental illness this is. And, again, all of this in light of that study, that this obsessive behavior actually causes their brains to change. It causes them to become more sick. And I think that has to be considered, especially if we're talking about compassion and genuinely caring for people and what is actually right. And what we would want to do if we were in the throes of a mental illness, how we would want people to react to us. Do we want to be enabled or do we want to be treated? That has to be the question. So here we're going to, and these are the last string of videos we're going to look at, and then I'm going to close out. We're going to look at some videos regarding how they practice sounding like women.
Hey guys, so today's video is going to be about yelling in a female voice and what that entails.
Now, obviously, if you're in a male voice, you're going to yell like, hey, hey, something like this, right? Which means just elevating the pitch and the volume. Most people will typically look at yelling as just elevating the volume. But there is a change in pitch, even in a male voice, which is, known for being more monotone, right?
However, in a female voice,
you can't yell like this, right? That shit don't work. That's too low.
So here's what we're going to do. First of all, we're going to look at the mechanisms that make up yelling. Like, what part of our voices allow us to yell in the way that we want to yell? We have two. So first of all, we have mechanism.
Yo, I cannot let that go. Can we just rewind this for the difference of his male voice and his female voice? Like, am I the only one who is shook by how deep his male voice is and how high his female voice is? This mess is crazy. I have to rewind that because you guys, that's crazy. I'm sorry.
Hey guys, so today's video is going to be about yelling in a female voice and what that entails.
Now, obviously, if you're in a male voice, you're going to yell like, hey, hey, something like this, right? Which means just elevating the pitch and the volume. Most people will typically look at yelling as just elevating the volume. But there is a change in pitch, even in a male voice, which is, known for being more monotone, right?
However, in a female voice,
you can't yell like this, right? That shit don't work. That's too low.
So here's what we're going to do. First of all, we're going to look at the mechanisms that make up yelling. Like, what part of our voices allow us to yell in the way that we want to yell? We have two. So first of all, we have mechanism 1, which contains mix 1. Mix 1 is chest voice that has taken on attributes of head voice, okay? So that's going to sound something like this. Hey! 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 You left your shit here! Hey! 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 You left your shit here! Right? Sounds kind of yelly. Hey! You left your shit here! That would be mechanism 1. Mix 1 within mechanism 1.
Wait, can we just take a brief moment to acknowledge that this is a tutorial on how to yell and still sound like a woman? Y'all, people, am I the only one who recognizes how deep this whole thing is? This is a tutorial in how to yell and still sound like a woman. I mean, for real though, okay? this is like, this, come on, y'all. Come on. This is crazy.
This one is just like a container, contains chest and what? Mix 1. Now, mechanism 2 contains head voice and a mix 2, okay? You can also yell in mechanism 2, specifically mix 2, okay? What is mix 2? Mix 2 is head voice that has taken on the attributes of chest voice. All right, excuse me. It's gonna sound something like this. Hey! Hey! Hey, you left your shit here! Hey! Hey, you left your shit here!
Man, I cannot get over the fact that his voice was hecka deep just like 2 minutes ago. He was so deep. He was like Barry White deep. And now he's screaming like a woman. This is crazy, y'all. Let's go to the next tutorial. But honestly, I should have saved that one for last because none of them are as good as this dude. This dude, I mean, he's the one to be giving the tutorial. Frankly, I'm impressed. I don't want to be impressed, but how can you not be impressed with that? That is insane. But what is more insane is that this fool practiced this. Imagine how many hours, how many months it took him to get to this point. And now he is giving a tutorial to other men on how to do the same. And they are only encouraged by the fact that his voice is naturally very, very, very white deep. And he has managed to get his voice up high. And I don't know if you guys were watching his Adam's apple, but when he talks in his regular voice, it pokes out really far. And when he talks in the feminine voice, it's a little bit restricted. It's a lot smaller because I was watching that. Let's go ahead and move to the next one. But don't expect as much because most of them don't enjoy talking in a man's voice. So don't expect all of them to do that. He is one of the few that feels comfortable reverting back to the masculine. I noticed on a lot of these videos, they really don't like dropping the charade. It makes them very uncomfortable.
And just because you choose to do something and I don't choose to do it doesn't make me any less of a woman, doesn't make you any less of a woman. I also just want to clear a few things up from my last one, most notably the comment I made on not being able to sound like a cis woman. And I just want to clear that up because I feel like my opinion has changed a little on that since filming that video. I think when I was filming that video, I was at a really insecure point in my life and at a much more insecure place than I am now. Now I pretty much think that I do sound like some cis woman. You know, I don't think my voice has changed that much since filming that video. I think it's my perception of my voice. You might not think I sound completely like a cis woman. I don't know. I feel like there are just a bunch of different kinds of cis women and cis women's voices. So I feel like I think you can get your voice to a point where especially cis people will not be able to tell that your voice is not.
I want you to listen very closely to what this man's about to say. He's like, I think you can get to a point where especially cis people, especially straight, normal people, won't be able to tell that you are faking your voice. But listen to the next thing that he says. The next thing he says is that we don't pay attention. The way that they obsessively watch men and women because they want to mimic us, we don't obsessively watch each other that way. So he is about to say that we don't pay attention the way that they do. So we don't notice them because we're not watching. And that is why I'm making this damn video. Because they are observing us. That's why I call it this single white female. Remember how that crazy lady observed that other woman and mimicked everything about her. They are observing us. And they know that we are not observant like they are. We aren't walking through the world trying to impersonate the opposite sex like they are. So listen to what he says next, because I think it's important that you guys know that they think this about us.
That of a cis woman, you know what I mean? I feel like, especially as trans people, we criticize ourselves quite harshly a lot of the time. And I feel like it helps to take a step back and realize that cis people are really bad sometimes at
realizing things. You know what I mean? So yeah, there's that. I think you can get your voice to the point where it's maybe if not identical, it's like indistinguishable from a cis woman's voice in at least cis people's eyes or whatever. So yeah, that's basically.
Did you hear what he said? He said cis people, straight, heterosexual, normal people aren't really good at observing things like that. And you can get your voice to sound pretty passable, at least to them, at least to us. And that is why I'm doing, like I'm telling you, I mean, I know that I started with that study and that was a lot of boring reading at the beginning of this, but that study was to set us up for this. And this is the precipice of this video. We're going to look at one more trans person, but this is the precipice. How many times? And he keeps emphasizing that. They aren't watching the way we are. They aren't observant the way we are. We're not obsessively staring at them the way that they have obsessively stared at and watched us. And so we don't clock them because we are being ignorant to how good at deception they are. And we need to get up on our game, you guys. Let's go ahead and go to the next video. Although, honestly, nobody's going to top that first dude with the voice. Now, we have seen a lot of things. We saw men tucking their penises. We saw men talking about makeup and hair. We saw a lot of stuff today. But I feel like the one that with the really Barry White voice, he really took the cake. That and the trans people that duct tape themselves to oblivion to get into those bikinis. I mean, wow. Just really wow.
I started doing this, my voice was resonating from a different part of my body. So when I was speaking normally before, my voice resonated from my chest. And I can still feel my voice a little bit in my chest, especially when I go to a lower or like a calmer kind of thing.
So I think this is really interesting. This man is saying that the male voice resonates in the chest and the female's voice resonates in the throat. And honestly, until I watched this video, I didn't really notice that about myself as a woman, that my voice really is in my throat. And honestly, you guys, when I sing, I'm a soprano. I'm like a middle soprano. I don't know what they call them, but I'm not the lowest soprano and I'm not the highest soprano, but I'm like in the middle. And or maybe they're just low and high. I'm just not the highest soprano. I'm like right under that. And my voice really is in my throat. Now, funnily enough, if I try to talk in a deep voice, I do go to my chest. That's so fascinating. The thing is that the fact that this man is sitting there and recognizes that, and I have lived as a woman for decades, and that has never occurred to me until I watched a man talk about it because he's trying to emulate and imitate the way that I talk naturally.
This, I can still feel it in my chest. But when I'm excited, when I'm talking like I normally would, it feels more like it's in my throat. So if I go back down to where I was as best as I can before I started voice training now, I want to just let you know. If you do this for a long time, subconsciously, you just let it build up. Eventually, you'll have to force yourself to go back to your other voice.
Okay, so this is really important. Remember that study said that if they engage in these behaviors long term, it starts to change their brain. So then their behaviors become natural and normal, quote unquote natural, right? Because it actually makes their brain sick to behave in these ways long term. So we don't see the brain differences in the children as we do the adults. But the adults, especially when they engage in this deception long term, their brains change. And this transgender man, he just essentially said that. He said, look, for a while, you'll have to struggle to talk like this. But after a while, you'll have to force yourself to go back to normal, to your normal voice. You'll have to force yourself to go to it. Tell me that's not consistent with the study that we just looked at the beginning of this video. Let me go ahead and stop there. I'm going to stop sharing. Okay. So, look, I'm going to put the study in the description box. Like I said, I felt I wanted to make this video because of the confusion in the Breakfast Club interview with the blonde transgender and the confusion about the voice. Also, because I heard a transgender person making the argument about the fact that their brains are different. And I really wanted to look at that myself because I've always been of the school that people are not born this way, that it's environmental and it's because of trauma or abuse, that they're mentally ill. Well, that we know they're mentally ill because it literally is a disorder, right? But when I read that study, and then when I looked and I started to delve into all of the levels, and we didn't even scratch the surface of the levels of deception and behavioral modification that they self-impose because of their delusion, that I can understand now why the psychotherapists, the psychologists, and the neuroscientists of these various studies have come to the conclusion that because their brains are healthy and normal as children, that it is this behavior that changes their mindset. And isn't it fitting that we ended on a transgender person that said, I struggled to behave like this until it became to the point where now I have to force myself to go to my natural self. I mean, that's a whole nother level of being trapped in your own delusion. And so, yes, transgender brains are different, but they are not different because they are born that way. Their brains are different because of everything we saw today and more. When a person is so delusional that they live their day-to-day life to pander to that delusion, it literally changes the plastic parts of their brain. And by plastic, I mean the moldable parts of their brain. Now, the thing that I will say about this study that I disagree with is that their conclusion, which I didn't read, their conclusion was essentially that with behavioral dialectic therapy, which is them forcing themselves to live in their natural gender roles, we can correct transgenderism. I disagree with that. I don't think that this is something that can be corrected. I think once you go so far down a rabbit hole, that's not something that can be helped. But something I definitely think we do need to do is we need to protect children, because it is them that we can stop this with. And just remember what the study said. You know, it's parents not correcting behaviors in their children, poor parenting. It's parents that have psychological disorders that are imposing things on their children. It's, you know, parents who might force a child into the opposite gender role, or have negative feelings about the gender that their child is because they wanted a child of another gender. It's societal impact. So constant bombardment with homosexual and transgender propaganda. It is those things that can seed these kind of thought processes. And then when the people act on them, and they act on them long term and with intensity, it can at that point change the makeup of their brain. And that is why we see these differences in transgender adults that we do not see in quote unquote transgender children. They still have healthy, normal brains. And that is just some food for thought, especially when you hear the argument that their brains look a certain way. Just know that they were not born that way. That in children, even children who identify as quote unquote transgender, their brains are normal and healthy. It is only after these activities that we watched, it is only after hormone therapy, is only after they're deep in their delusion that we start to see their brains match up to their delusion. So yeah, with that said, I'm going to get out of here. And I will talk to you guys a little bit later.